Hello! Super special greetings to the super special secret internet gang. That's you. Hi, I'm the cozy representative, aka Julian. That's me. I'm back. Another video. It's been a little bit. It's been a weird summer, to say the least. To say the very least. Even saying it's a bad summer would be kind of appropriate, but this isn't about me, okay? That's just why I haven't been around on these YouTube parts in a little bit. Well, before we jump into it, I got a new mic, so I don't know. It looks a lot fancier than my old one, and I think I'm using it correctly. There's a whole interface system now. Pretty wild. So this is what we're trying out. If it sounds like shit, then sorry. I don't really know what I'm doing with it, but I think it's okay. It's not clipping. So that's probably a good thing. Anyway, today, this new video there's a lot going on today. It's my 10, not top 10, they're in no particular order, but just 10 essential neon pop punk records. Now, what is neon pop punk? Julian, the cozy representative, you ask. I will tell you. So basically, the wave of pop punk that I and certain other people have deemed neon pop punk is sort of what I would say was going on between 2005 and 2009. Bands like All Time Low, The Maine, Forever the Sickest Kids, things like that. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. And the reason why I would call it neon pop punk and why certain other people would call it neon pop punk is because not only, well, mostly, but not only the aesthetic, right? The clothes that they were wearing, all the band shirts, all the band's merch, and the shirts that the bands would wear had crazy animated neon fucking purple dinosaurs on them and shit. And the hair was all like platinum blonde and crazy colors, and it was just multicolored neon everything. All the album art was crazy neon colors and everything. So that is probably the main thing of what people think of, but also the music was just incredibly bouncy and energetic, and I would almost relate it to like Saturday morning cartoons or something, just like something different everywhere you turn, and it's always bouncy, and almost the music also gives off sort of a neon colored aesthetic, if you will. So basically, I was around 12 or 13 during this scene 10 years ago, and I was involved with it. Not involved, but I was there in terms of I bought the records, and I was seeing the bands, and I was obsessed with it, and I still look back on it very fondly, and I still love a lot of that music and listen to it to this day. So I just thought I'd put together a list of what I thought are just the 10 essential, once again, no particular order. The order is actually from when they came out. So it starts early in the wave and then moves on. But anyway, yeah, so just my 10 essential neon pop punk records. If you're interested in this genre, this video might be interesting to you. If you're not, and you just like pop punk, but you know like newer pop punk, maybe you should go back and check out some of these albums, because some of them might be pretty good. Alright, let's go. Alright, number 1, Fall Out Boy's From Under the Cork Tree. Their classic, seminal record that took them from playing small clubs on the underground circuit to being all over MTV and headlining arenas. 2005's From Under the Cork Tree blew the doors open for Fall Out Boy's career, turning them into a household name and looked at as proper celebrities. However, it also kicked down the door for the neon pop punk scene as we know it. Fall Out Boy's label, Fueled by Ramen, which was relatively unknown just a few years prior to Fall Out Boy blowing up, was now on the verge of becoming one of the biggest labels in the scene. Also, Pete Wentz was becoming a tastemaker himself with his own label, Decadence Records, signing several other hit bands in the genre, such as Panic at the Disco, Cobra Starship, and Gym Class Heroes. In my opinion, if Nirvana's Nevermind was the album that ignited the grunge explosion of the early 90s, you know what I'm talking about, then From Under the Cork Tree was the Nevermind of the neon pop punk scene. You know what I'm saying? What made this album so special was the danceable yet still heavy and rocking guitar parts and the frantic and impossibly catchy melodramatic songwriting. But most importantly, Patrick Stump's unique, distinct vocals paired with Pete Wentz's relatable hard-on-your-sleeve lyrics put Fall Out Boy on a level above everybody else. When I listen to From Under the Cork Tree, it still sounds just as fresh and new and exciting as it did when I first heard it in 2005, and it's still influencing bands and winning the hearts of heartbroken misfit teenagers and adults all over the world to this day. A true classic, this record will definitely go down in history as one that set the bar high and gave tens of thousands of hopeless, lonely kids something to believe in. Alright, now just a year after From Under the Cork Tree dropped, electro-tinged emo power pop unit Hellogoodbye came through with their heartfelt debut, Zombies, Aliens, Vampires, Dinosaurs on Drive-Thru Records in 2006. Armed with a huge hit single that played all over MTV, Here in Your Arms, Hellogoodbye brought something a bit different to the table than most other bands in this scene. They traded in loud rocking guitars and upbeat live drums for synthesizers and electro beats and a hearty dose of vocoder. While many bands in the neon wave flirted with electronics and dance beats, Hellogoodbye took it to the extreme and probably did it in a more tasteful fashion than any other band from this time. Although deeply rooted in the neon MySpace scene culture at this point, Zombies, Aliens, Vampires, Dinosaurs still holds up to this day, as it has influence ranging all across the board, from classic 50s and 60s pop to more contemporary indie pop. Not to mention it just has damn good songwriting. You wonder how songs like that could be so simple yet so on point and catchy, and I find myself going back to this record whenever I have a new crush of sorts. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? That's part of the charm of this record. It's comprised almost entirely of extremely cutesy and heartfelt love songs dressed up nicely with Forrest Klein's innocent and vulnerable voice. This sound was later emulated and further explored by equally as cutesy MySpace core acts such as Never Shout Never or The Ready Set. It sounds like how it felt to get an earth-shattering crush on someone when you were 14, and it always brings me back to those feelings when I listen to it. I think this album is very special and has a different kind of flair than most of the music going on at this time. In this particular wave, at least. Alright, released the same year as Zombies, Aliens, Vampires, Dinosaurs, 2006, Cute Is What We Aim For dropped their debut on Fueled by Ramen, entitled The Same Old Blood Rush with a New Touch. Now, this particular album by this particular band was following a trend in the scene started by Panic at the Disco's massive debut, A Fever You Can't Sweat Out. The only reason I'm not talking about that Panic record in this list is because I don't necessarily classify that album as neon pop punk per se. However, the trend that album goes is as follows. Panic at the Disco were relatively unknown before that album came out. They hadn't even released an EP and hadn't done much touring outside of their hometown, but via the internet, Pete Wentz found them. They went on one tour and released one record, and within a few weeks defied all odds and blew up on the radio and became massive. Well, I said a few weeks, but really like under a year. In under a year they started. I meant a few weeks after their record came out. Anyway, why am I bringing this up? Well, it's the same thing that happened to Cute Is What We Aim For, and as you will notice, also happened to several other bands during this time. It was a running motif that I can only attribute to the internet now being prevalent in artists' careers, and it being easier than ever to record your songs at home on your laptop and garner a fan base on websites that were popular at the time, such as MySpace or Pure Volume, before ever even playing a show. Nowadays, this method of launching a career has been overstimulated and is more so the standard for most artists, whereas during this time it was still a very new concept. Because of that, it was easier for bands to get popular this way at the time. Plus, going back to the comparison I made between From Under the Cork Tree and Nevermind, what happened after Nevermind came out? Well, every record label was looking for the next Nirvana for the next 4 or 5 years. After From Under the Cork Tree came out, guess what happened? Every label was looking for the next Fall Out Boy. So boom, any band that sounded remotely like Fall Out Boy and had an online presence of any sort had a very good chance of possibly getting huge. So in comes Cute Is What We Aim For. Now, their debut record, The Same Old Blood Rush with a New Touch, unlike the last two albums I talked about, I view this album as more of a scene relic and something that only could have existed at the time that it was released. Although I loved this album a lot in 8th grade and still go back to it sometimes, whenever I play it for people who haven't heard it, it never seems to get a good response, which is unlike when I show someone, say, Fall Out Boy deep cuts or songs by a band like Mayday Parade, which people who don't typically listen to this genre usually enjoy. I think lead vocalist Shant Hasikian, remember that dude? His voice is too whiny and piercing for many, and the often misogynistic and slut-shaming lyrics have not aged super well. So, why is this album on my list of essential neon pop punk records? Well, it was a huge album at the time, and Cute Is What We Aim For had a very noticeable presence within the scene. Anyone who's anyone who was around during this time listening to this kind of music was certainly bumping the singles The Curse of Curves and There's a Class for This, if not the whole record. This album is very sassy and snarky throughout. The bounciness of the up-tempo songs and catchiness of the attention-grabbing vocals went perfectly with the sound that was popular during this time. The album just sounds like high school drama and makes you feel like you're in a high school popularity contest with gossip swirling throughout the hallways. It was perfect for scene teenagers during this time, like myself, and although I don't think it's aged too gracefully, it's definitely to be looked back on as a noteworthy example of the genre at the time. Also in 2006, Boys Like Girls exploded onto the scene with their bona fide, hit-filled, chart-topping, self-titled debut album. Unlike Cute Is What We Aim For, who were more deeply rooted into the pop-punk scene, and mostly played shows in clubs with other contemporary bands, Boys Like Girls exploded into the mainstream with real-deal pop radio hit singles such as The Great Escape and Thunder. Much like Cute Is What We Aim For and Panic, Boys Like Girls had only been a band for 1 year prior to releasing this album. They uploaded demos of The Great Escape and Thunder to Pure Volume, which landed them the #1 spot on the website's top unsigned bands chart, attracting the attention of producer Matt Squire. The band went on just a few nationwide tours before entering the studio to record their Columbia Records debut. Although they had toured with scene favorites such as Metro Station, Good Charlotte, and the Maine, they also found themselves in situations that other neon pop-punk bands couldn't even dream of, such as opening for Avril Lavigne in 2008, not to mention Martin Johnson dating country pop star Taylor Swift in the same year. You might have heard of her, right? Now, musically, Boys Like Girls obviously knew how to write a pop rock hit, and a lot of the songs on this album take more from the Move Along era All-American Rejects playbook of songwriting, lacking the harder edge of other bands like Fall Out Boy. There are some truly great songs on this album, and while I think the best songs are the singles and some of the deeper cuts leave something to be desired, this was a monumental album at the time and a true feat for a band of this caliber. The fact that a catchy pop rock band with such obvious ties and influence from the Warped Tour neon pop punk scene could get so popular in the mainstream world is something that only could have happened during this era and was truly remarkable. Not to mention, this album just has some really great songs and still holds a place in so many people's hearts, making it an obvious choice on my list of essential neon pop punk albums. Alright, so now we find ourselves in 2007. Deep in the throes of the neon pop punk explosion, it was definitely at its peak during 2007 and 2008. New bands were being signed left and right, and 4 to 5 bands stacked tour packages were aplenty. Everyone was rocking neon t-shirts with purple dinosaurs on them and wearing multicolored headbands with vintage 80s track shorts. We have arrived. The crest of the wave. It's perfectly relevant, perfectly in its place, with teenagers and adults who aren't too cool and jaded yet, eating it up without a hint of irony. Warped Tour dates are selling out in cities nationwide, and alternative press magazines are flying off the shelves every month. Things are good. In September of that year, we find All Time Low following their attention-getting and now classic EP, Put Up or Shut Up, with their first Hopeless Records full-length, So Wrong It's Right. This album is chock full of hooky bangers that grab you by the collar, except in a fun, inviting manner, and not in the threatening one. In my eyes, these 19-year-olds from Baltimore penned a perfect summer album. The songs practically make you feel the hot summer sun against your bare skin, with the youthful ignorance overtaking you, as well as a hearty dose of innocence. It's a fun listen no matter what, and I bet you $20 you can't listen to songs like 6 Feet Under the Stars or Poppin' Champagne without getting the melodies stuck in your head for a minimum of like 3 days. Dear Maria, Count Me In is a certified pop punk classic, right up there with Sugar We're Going Down, and Remembering Sunday is probably one of the most beautiful acoustic pop punk ballads I can think of. Now, unlike the Cute Is What We Aim For album that I talked about, So Wrong It's Right holds up surprisingly well and doesn't feel stuck in its era. I could picture a lesser known pop punk band releasing this album like this year and not being super surprised by the sound, as the album harks back to a more classic pop punk sound, being more influenced by legacy bands like New Found Glory and Blink-182. And unlike the Boys Like Girls album, the album does not rely on its singles, and it's a solid listen all the way through. Every song packs a punch in some way. All Time Low really scored a home run with this debut, and yes, I'm aware it's technically their second full length, but this is the one that really put them on the map, which is why it deserves a spot on my list of essential neon pop punk records. Ah, yes, the infamous Metro Station, comprised of Mason Musso and Trey Cyrus, who met on the set of the popular Disney show Hannah Montana, which Mason's brother Mitchell and Trace's sister Miley were stars of. They bonded over similar taste in music and decided to start the band Metro Station. Remember the common motif that between scene bands that I was mentioning earlier? Metro Station started in 2006, releasing some demos on MySpace, which quickly began garnering plays, which attracted the attention of an intern working for Columbia Records, and the band was signed shortly after. The self-titled debut album was released in 2007, just a year after they formed, and their singles Shake It and 17 Forever charted on the Billboard Hot 100. Shake It went platinum, that's 1 million fucking sales in 2008. Can I just sidetrack here for a moment and say maybe it wasn't such a good idea that most of these bands blew the fuck up so quickly and were signed and touring nationally and charting on Billboard merely a year after forming? Maybe that's why most of these bands straight up aren't around anymore. It's not healthy for a band to blow up almost instantly without growing a little bit first. On paper, it looks super awesome, but I'm sure it wasn't super awesome for a lot of these bands to deal with mentally, especially with most of these bands being fresh out of high school. Plus, where do you go when you have a platinum single on your first album? Like, where do you go from there? Unless you're like a super mega pop star. I don't know. If you're Metro Station, not very far, but we'll get to that in a second. Okay, anyways, back to this Metro Station album. This band got a lot of shit back in the day and were often accused of being industry plants because of Mason and Trace's respective families. Also, the songs were way more on the pop side of things and the punk side of things, with a healthy dose of neon aesthetic and songs most people wrote off as solely appealing to preteens. However, I see something a little more in this album, and I think it is an important landmark of this era of scene culture. These songs are just plain fun and harken back to 80s synth pop with a 2000s scene twist on it. If you were under the age of 18 when this album was popular, you will definitely crack a genuine smile when someone mentions this band or their legitimate pop radio smash singles such as 17 Forever or Shake It. The songs are plain fun and memorable, and songs like Kelsey and Now That We're Done are surprisingly heartfelt. Songs like Control and Wish We Were Older are certified party bangers and make you want to shotgun Four Locos and get butt-ass naked on the dance floor. This album has a strange dichotomy where the songs on the surface can be seen as vapid party bangers only existing for you to shake your ass to, but personally I hear a lot of emotion and heartfelt longing in the vocal performances, however cheesy the lyrics can sometimes be. And overall, the whole album has a pretty dark undertone to it, painting the landscape of partying in a dark nightclub well after midnight, as opposed to taking in the sights and sounds of the city during a summer day, like most of these bands' songs. I think this album also holds up surprisingly well, and although at the time it was compared to bands like 303 and Cobra Starship, who also haven't really aged super well, I think there's something deeper to these songs than just vapid party bangers, and I definitely think this whole album is a good thing to throw on if you're trying to dive into a true classic from the neon pop-punk explosion. By the way, no disrespect to 303 or Cobra Starship. I love both of those bands still. I'm just, gotta make comparisons, Alright. Mayday Parade's 2007 Fearless Records debut is quite the record. Possibly the biggest outlier on this list because the vibe of the songs doesn't necessarily fit into the typical neon pop-punk vibe, and I realize that. The album is far more melodramatic and intense and, dare I say, emo. Way more influenced by bands such as Taking Back Sunday and other moodier pop-punk bands who even slightly verge into some post-hardcore territories. This is not a happy, fun-in-the-sun album. It's not a cutesy synth-pop album. It's not an album you're going to party to, unless partying to you means drinking straight whiskey alone in your room, throwing pictures of your ex-lover into the fireplace. That's the only kind of partying you're going to be doing, a lesson in romantics. The songs on this album are beautifully crafted, the lyrics are poignant and sincere, and the whole thing emits a feeling of missing someone you love on a rainy day. Jamie All Over is a tried and true timeless pop-punk classic and really should have been all over MTV. When I Go Home You're So Dead and Black Cat are unique, moody bangers that just make you want to listen to them over and over again to really let them sink in. And Miserable at Best, holy fucking shit. What do I need to say about the song that hasn't already been said before? It speaks for itself. I remember laying in my bed in 8th grade when my first girlfriend dumped me, crying to this song, insane fucking tears with this on repeat. It's a beautiful song, and frankly a beautiful record that transcends pop punk as I know it. So, why is A Lesson in Romantics on my list of essential neon pop punk records if it's not really a traditional neon pop punk record? Well, here's how I look at it. Gym Class Heroes weren't really an emo band, but because they were on Pete Wentz's label and toured with Fall Out Boy and the Academy Is all the time, people always lumped them in with the emo bands because that's the scene they came from and were most associated with. If A Lesson in Romantics had come out in 2004 on, say, Victory Records, they probably would have been more associated with bands like Taking Back Sunday and Matchbook Romance. But no, it came out in 2007, arguably the peak year for neon pop punk, on Fearless Records, which next to Fueled by Ramen was the biggest label in the neon pop punk world. They were label mates and toured all the time with bands like the Maine, Every Avenue, and All Time Low. And despite the more emo and melodramatic flair to their music, they were smack dab in the neon scene, so therefore, A Lesson in Romantics gets looked back on as a neon pop punk record with just a little bit more emo flair than their contemporaries. They captured lightning in a bottle on Lesson in Romantics and laid down some truly magical pop punk tracks. This record never gets old for me and is truly essential in my eyes. Yes! The Maine were another band who were fresh out of high school and had only been a band for a little over a year before creating their debut full-length for Fearless Records in 2008. This is an easy breezy pop rock record tailor-made for soaking in easygoing summer nights with your friends. Most comparable to All Time Low's So Wrong It's Right, but if that record smoked a bunch of weed and listened to more Third Eye Blind and The Replacements as opposed to Blink-182, this album might be the breeziest record on this list, as in my eyes it can be classified by one word that most records in the neon pop punk category can't relate to, which is relaxed. It's a chill record, quite frankly, from the loose instrumentals all the way to John O'Callaghan's unique vocals, which aren't piercing or whiny or in your face. It sounds like he just smoked a blunt in the woods and did some hot yoga before recording. The songs are real simple and mostly revolve around teenage topics like falling in and out of love and hanging out with your friends, but unlike their moody contemporaries, the Maine sound rather content with themselves on this record. There's no jealousy or gossip or heartbreak. They make everything sound like it's happening for a reason, and they're grateful to be where they are despite being so young. Relaxed instead of restless. Content instead of contempt. On top of that, the songs are just plain fun and give me hope that things are going to be okay. The album isn't too in your face and is a nice listen all the way through. There are more indie rock influences to it than their contemporaries, which the Maine explored a lot more on their later albums. But to me, despite their goofy aesthetic at this time, talk about some of those promo pictures, am I right? Can't Stop Won't Stop stands out to me as a unique selection from the late 2000s neon wave, and I'm glad to give it the recognition it deserves in this video, the Cozy Representative 2019 Let's Go. Forever the Sickest Kids, which, as you can gather by their name, were certainly one of the goofier outfits from this wave of music. Truly an act that only could have existed in 2008. They are a true relic and a good example of what this subculture was like if you weren't there to experience it yourself. Now, despite their tongue-in-cheek band name and Cookie Monster hats and flashy attire reminiscent of rappers from the 2000s, I think Forever the Sickest Kids actually never really got a fair shake, because the songs on this album actually pack quite a punch and are, quite frankly, pretty fucking good, in my opinion. Forever the Sickest Kids brought something a little more to the often monotonous neon pop punk scene. There were 6 members, a synth player, not 1, not 2, but 3 lead vocalists, which were all equally utilized to the fullest extent. Those fucking 3-part harmonies and call and response sections are so well done and so satisfying to listen to. They had pop sections, punk sections, heavy sections, acoustic songs, you name it. This album is one of the catchiest of its kind and also surprisingly hard-hitting and emotional. For example, the bridge of She's a Lady and the chorus of Believe Me I'm Lying are surprisingly powerful, and Hey Brittany and My Worst Nightmare both have tasteful breakdown sections. The album never loses steam, and almost every song on this record could be the lead single on a lesser talented band's album. I honestly ride or die for this record, and much like the Metro Station album I talked about, people usually compare this band to Cobra Starship or 303 or Family Force 5 or whatever, which makes sense to me if you just look at their band name and their aesthetic, and that's it. But maybe if Forever the Sickest Kids had a different band name and took a different approach to their whole look, maybe they might have been able to properly follow this album up or last longer than a few years. and actually be regarded as maybe somewhat influential or something different. However, this was not the fate for Forever the Sickest Kids. Despite this, they delivered something truly bold and exciting with this record, no matter how misunderstood of a record, in my opinion, it has been over the years. Man, what a long and winding road it's been, huh? I'm going to finish this off with one of the last albums released during the true golden era of the neon pop punk wave, which was A Rocket to the Moon's Fueled by Ramen debut, On Your Side. It was released in October of 2009, and at this point, 4 years had gone by since the release of the earth-shattering From Under the Cork Tree. At this point, Fall Out Boy had just announced their hiatus. Panic at the Disco had released a Beatles-inspired album and then lost 2 of their members. Paramore were 1 year away from losing 2 of their members and becoming a pop band. Cobra Starship and Gym Class Heroes were about a year or 2 away from releasing cash-grabbing, radio-focused albums. Not to mention, the genre had simply become oversaturated at this point. There was an onslaught of bands who all wore the same clothes, all had the same haircuts, and had the same predictable music. The template had been set, and for a few years it was a pretty quick fast track to success because it was new. So if you had your hair straightener on, had your MySpace game on lock, and had a few catchy songs about girls with some wo-ohs thrown in there, you were probably going to be the next big thing. But just like anything in life, the center cannot hold, neither can people's interest. The neon pop-punk style was now no longer exciting. What was happening to pop-punk? Bands like The Wonder Years and Transit and Man Overboard and The Story So Far were getting popular, which was more of a masculine kind of, they almost looked like hardcore bands kind of thing. And also what was happening to the Warped Tour scene, the metalcore explosion, right? Asking Alexandria, Bring Me the Horizon, The Devil Wears Prada, that was all becoming popular, which that was like, fuck the whole boy band. Well, a lot of them were also really hot, but fuck the whole, you know, like, cutesy Never Shout Never thing. We want to fucking scream, we want breakdowns, and that was becoming more popular. So, at this point, the neon pop-punk scene was all but winding down. So, that leads me to the last essential neon pop-punk album I'll talk about. As I stated, A Rocket to the Moon's 2009 Fueled by Ramen debut, On Your Side. A Rocket to the Moon's rise to success was the story of 1,000 bands during this time, originally beginning as singer-songwriter Nick Santino's solo electroacoustic project on MySpace. He started blowing up on MySpace and befriended fellow up-and-coming contemporaries, the Maine, who helped him turn A Rocket to the Moon into a full band, enlisting Lauren Brinton, who formerly played drums in Arizona indie rockers Lydia, as well as Brighton vocalist Justin Richards and friend of the Maine Eric Halverson, aka Halvo. The still unsigned band landed a spot playing Bamboozle in 2008, as well as a performance on an unsigned artist section of TRL, based on just internet hype alone. Who happened to be watching TRL that one fateful day Rocket played their brand new song Dakota on fucking national TV? None other than Pete Wentz, whose taste-making influence had proved wildly successful time and time again. And his reign of terror over the scene wasn't over quite yet. He reached out to A Rocket to the Moon and got them in touch with Fueled by Ramen, who released their breakout EP, 2008's Greetings From, great EP. They followed it in 2009 with On Your Side. The album I could compare this to the most on this list is the Maine's Can't Stop, Won't Stop. It's breezy, driving with the top down, sunglasses on, taking it easy style pop punk, where the Maine took unique for the genre influences from things such as 90s indie rock. A Rocket to the Moon come forward with sort of an alt-country influence in songs like She's Killing Me and Like We Used To, as well as some hints of indie folk on A Lonely Night. It does have tried and true driving pop-punk bangers like Annabelle and Mr. Right, and even a flirtation with electronic dance elements on Sometimes. While at its core a neon pop-punk record, these hints of influence from territory previously unexplored showed new paths for both A Rocket to the Moon and the neon pop-punk scene as a whole. While this provides a very fun and satisfying listen, I think it is also representative of the state of the wave A Rocket to the Moon were a part of and where it was headed. You couldn't just put out a paint-by-numbers pop-punk record anymore. These bands needed to push the envelope a little bit and try new things in order to grow their identities, since the specific subculture they were rooted in was now coming to an unspoken close. And that's pretty much it. As you know, as I was stating from here, the pop-punk genre, as we knew it, got kind of different, and the general landscape for what was most popular on Warped Tour and in alternative press became different. And a lot of these pop-punk bands that I talked about, a lot of them turned into country bands, which A Rocket to the Moon did, and Boys Like Girls also did. A lot of them broke up, which Fall Out Boy did at the time, and Here's What We Aim For Who else broke up? Metro Station, they broke up. Forever the Sickest Kids. And, you know, some bands carried the torch. The Maine are still around. They were always around. Mayday Parade, always been around. Fall Out Boy are back. For Hellogoodbye have always been around. You know, but these bands have had many different peaks and valleys in their career, and I think while the Maine and Mayday Parade are kind of reclaiming their title as like, no, we weren't just scene fad bands, like they're still around and making good music and you know, popular for just being themselves and not necessarily you know, just looked at as scene fads, and they've worked very hard to do that. But you know, and All Time Low, oh yeah, All Time Low are still very popular, killing it. And it's you know, it's interesting to see which bands did what, which bands kind of veered off in a completely different direction, which bands who they veered off into a different direction and that hurt them and then they broke up, or where that actually worked for them and they kept going. And then a lot of these bands straight up aren't around anymore, and some of them are still the biggest bands in the world. Fall Out Boy. So yeah, that was my video. I don't know, leave a comment, tell me what you think. Are there any more albums from this era that deserve to be talked about? Are there any differing opinions that you have? Maybe I said something that rubbed you the wrong way, or maybe you disagree with something, or maybe you just want to add something. Let me know. What are your thoughts on these bands, these albums? How do they hold up to you? Let's fucking talk. As always, it's Julian, the Cozy Representative. I'm going to try to make more videos more often. I think this one was probably pretty long. Whatever. I'm passionate about this. Cozy Representative signing off. Much love to all you beautiful people, and I hope you're all doing great. That was weird. Goodbye.